Hi, welcome to Capital Storytelling's live main event. We're so thrilled to have you here. It's going to be a great evening. My name is Tammy Spence, and I'm going to be your host for the night. We have a fantastic lineup of storytellers. I've had the pleasure of listening to all of their stories, and trust me, you are in for a treat. If this is your first time attending an event, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. We're thrilled to have you here. If you've been here before, welcome back. You know the drill. You're part of our family now. And our family has grown quite a bit over the past year. It's so nice to see people chiming in from all over the place. I'm on the East Coast. I know we have some people on the East Coast, plenty of people in California. So thank you for being here. For those of you who may not know, Capital Storytelling is a nonprofit organization based in Sacramento, California. Our mission is to empower individuals by teaching them how to tell their own narratives, and in doing so, foster empathy among those living in our city. We are committed to diversity and inclusivity, ensuring that all of our city's stories are heard. We host live main events 2 or 3 times a year, and it's a chance where storytellers get on stage and share true life stories, which is what we will be doing tonight, only on a virtual stage. We want to extend a special thanks to Capital Public Radio for sponsoring this event. We love working with them. Before we get started, there's just a couple housekeeping things to go over. We absolutely love it when you type in the chat. In this virtual platform, the chat lets us know that there's an audience out there who's listening, engaged, and excited about the stories. It's also our way of applauding for the storytellers. But when a storyteller is actually on stage sharing, please hold off on typing anything in the chat. The chat pops up and can be distracting to the teller and to others in the audience. And we want to give our storytellers our full attention. That said, anytime you see my face on the screen, feel free to type in the chat, and when a teller has finished sharing their story, do give them love, show them their appreciation, and chat it up. All right, let's go ahead and get started. The theme for tonight is journey, the meaning of which is open to the interpretation of the storyteller. Tonight, you will hear personal, true stories about professional growth, family life, love, adventure, and self-awareness. From 5 fantastic storytellers. Let's go ahead and bring them on stage so you can see everyone. Yay! Welcome, Layla, Diana, Jean, Matt, and John. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Tonight, we are here to celebrate your stories and listen delightfully as you share your journeys with us. Now we're going to go ahead and take the storytellers off stage and get started with our lineup. Our first storyteller of the night is Diana. Welcome, Diana, to the virtual stage. Yay! Perfect. Diana Medina is a first-generation Mexican-American poet and educator, born and raised in Los Angeles, California. She is a writer, storyteller, goofball, extreme crafter, and self-proclaimed poetpreneur. Love that, by the way. Diana is the program director at The Practice Space, a Bay Area nonprofit, and the founder of her own business called Off the Clocker. She has been working on her first book entitled Heal Out Loud, which will be out this summer. And congratulations, Diana. Her title of the story tonight is My First Political Scandal. Let's take it away, Diana.
Hello. Hi, everybody. So I'm Diana, and I'll just jump into the story. So I'm a junior in college, and I went to college in Southern California, California State University, Northridge. And while I was there, I was a commuter student. So I was first generation and had the kind of parents that did not let me move away to college. And so my hope was, okay, I'm going to soak up everything that college has to offer by doing what I could to get as involved as I could. So while I went to Cal State Northridge, I had a full plate of classes. I had 2 jobs. I had no car. I was involved on campus. And one of the things I got involved in on campus was the student government. And this was not something I chose by choice. This was something where someone found me and were like, hey, you look like a great leader. Let's get you involved in the student government. And so by my junior year, I had been on the student government for 3 years. I was one of the senators in the student senate. And the student government and senators did things like helped organizations get funding on campus for programs. They served on advisory committees with faculty and staff of the university, a whole range of community type projects. And so that was me. I was one of those people. And by my junior year, I was one of the most senior people in that group. And one of the things I really loved about the student government was that as a commuter student with a full load of classes, being involved meant that you got priority registration every year you were involved in student government, which means I never had to crash a class. I always got the classes I needed because I needed to be available every Tuesday from 2 to 5 for these long 3-hour Senate meetings where all of these things would happen. And so on one of those days, I go to the Senate meeting. It's a day like any other day. And our president, starts the meeting by saying, today will be my last meeting. I have to step down due to medical reasons. And so therefore, Kara, who is our vice president, will be stepping up to be president, and we will be opening up a nominations process for anybody who is interested to apply to be the new student senate vice president. And everybody, was like, okay, very concerned about Tim, the president, leaving. We did a little goodbye for him. And then, they kind of got right into the housekeeping of this is how you can apply if you want to be one of the people considered for the vice presidency. And by that point, after the meetings, I kind of did my normal thing, which was I would pick up all my stuff hurriedly, run to the office, do my 1 office hour that I was supposed to do afterwards, and then go to my next job, whatever that was on that day. And so one of the things that made me really surprised that day was that a couple of people came up and were like, hey, are you going to apply? Like there was this big old gossip, like who's going to apply? Who's going to be the people? And I was like, I really don't have time for that. I really don't know if I can. I have a full plate of classes. I have 2 jobs. I don't have a car, all these things. I saw kind of nothing but barriers, and I already kind of felt like my plate was full. But then I was convinced by some advisors, fellow senators, and in particular, Cara, the colleague of mine who was going to be the new president, really encouraged to apply. And I said, okay, I'll think about it. So I thought about it for a day or two. And then, in the 2 days I was thinking about it, they were like, hey, we haven't gotten your application. Are you going to apply? You really should apply. Like, you're the most qualified person. Please apply. Please apply. I was just getting this from all over the place, particularly the adults in the Senate. So these were the staff people that worked at the university that sort of, oversaw the development of all the student leaders, lots of people encouraging me to apply. So I went in ahead and I said, okay, fine, I'll apply, just so they stop bothering me. I don't think I'm going to get it. I don't really have time, but I'm going to apply. So I apply, and the application process is very rigorous. There's essays, there's resumes, there's several interviews, there's this, long vetting process. And so I go through all that stuff. And 2 weeks later, I get this notification that I am going to be nominated to be the new Associated Student Senate Vice President. And congratulations, this is amazing. And so the day comes when I'm supposed to be appointed. And from a procedure standpoint, the way the Senate would do this is that they would have their normal Tuesday meetings, but before the meetings, they would call a special meeting. And in the special meeting, they would take up anybody that had been appointed or that was coming up for being nominated, and then they would vote on them. And then once the vote passed, then that person would get appointed. Now, this vetting process, is important to note, is mainly seen as a formality because of the many things that the person has to go through to even get to the point where they nominate them on an agenda. And so that day I'm going there, and at this point I had already had to make arrangements with one of my jobs to change my hours. I had to figure out all these things to make myself available because they said, we're going to nominate you. You're going to be appointed. You're going to be the one. And so, let's make sure you're available, all those things. So I do all that. I go to this special meeting. It's Tuesday again from 2 to 5. And they say, okay, just go up and, before they vote on you, you just have to say a little speech, introduce yourself. Everybody knows you. All the people as I'm going into this meeting are like, congratulations, how exciting. This is amazing. So I go up and I say my thing. I say, hey, I'm Diana. You all know me. I'm looking forward to working with everybody, blah, 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 right? And again, this is a formality. So at this point, everybody's kind of like, yeah, it's going to be fine. And then the vote starts to happen. And, the parliamentarian is like, okay, all those in favor of Diana becoming the new vice president, please say aye. And there was nobody. Nobody said yes. And then they said all opposed, and one person raised their hand. And then they said, are there any abstentions? And 19 people raised their hand to abstain. And so there was the silence that kind of took over the room. Everybody, all the adults were kind of looking at each other. Cara, who was the president sitting next to the parliamentarian, was kind of looking at me, looking at her, looking at the room. Everybody was kind of like, what's happening? And it doesn't pass. And so I don't get appointed. And it was awkward because there was an empty chair at the front of the room next to Cara, where once this person got appointed would sit and therefore then preside over the meeting as the new vice president. But because I wasn't appointed, there was no chair for me in the Senate section. And so I had to grab a chair, sit on the edge of the table, and then for the next 2 hours, resume my duties as a senator because I had not gotten appointed to be the vice president, which was its own like parliamentary procedure awkwardness. But we go through it, right? The meeting is then over. I'm still not fully processing like what happened. This all seemed like such a shoo-in. And so then I'm walking and going to the office to do my hour of office hours that I do after the meeting every time. And then Cara's like, hey, can I talk to you? And I said, sure. So I follow her into this office where is Leanne. Leanne is the other student advisor that oversees all the operations of the Senate. So I'm sitting in the desk and Cara's sitting next to me. Leanne is at her desk and we're all just sitting there. And they're like, all right, we need to talk to you about what happened. And I'm like, okay, and in my brain, again, I'm still like, I'm already, it's midterms at this point. It's like the middle of the semester. So I'm thinking about like, I have a paper to write. I have these office hours to do. I have, other stuff to prep for. I'm president of another organization. So I had a lot on my mind. I didn't really have time to process kind of what was this. It was just weird. It was awkward. I didn't want to apply anyway. Like I was having all these feelings about it, but like, they were just floating. I wasn't really processing them. And then they hand me this blank piece of paper. And they're like, we thought about whether or not we should show this to you, but we really want to show this to you because we think it'll help you understand what happened. And so I look at this blank piece of paper, I fold it open, and it's typed. It's an anonymous type letter that has a long list of assaults on my character. Diana isn't committed. Diana doesn't care about our students. Diana left the meeting early last week. Diana is not qualified to be the vice president of this Senate. Just long lists of assaults on my character. And then naming this other senator, Maria, as the person who should have been nominated. And they don't understand why she wasn't nominated, but they chose me and that was a bad choice. And so I'm looking at this letter. I look up at them. They're looking at me. And at this point, I'm just like overwhelmed with emotion because I'm like, I already have so much on my mind. I'm already doing all these other things. I'm one of the few Latino people on this body of student leaders to begin with in a campus that's very diverse, but our representation doesn't look that way. And now here is this anonymous letter that is an assault on my character that influenced, 19 of my peers who have worked with me for 3 years and allowed themselves to think that this stuff was true. And I just burst into tears because they don't even know me. They don't know anything about me. and like the main thing that I was really mad about was like this note about leaving the meeting early because I'm a commuter student and I have to catch buses. I don't have a car. And on the days that I am borrowing someone's car and parking it in, 2-hour parking, I have to go move it, and these were arrangements I had already made prior with all the people, all the adults that know what my needs are so that I could be present. And so I'm like, this person doesn't even know why I left. Like, I went to go move my car. Like, what? Like, I was just so like, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like in Spanish, they say el colmo. It's like, it's just the thing on top of everything else. It was the colmo of like, really this assault on my character and like this thing about the meeting, and I'm crying and I'm upset, and they're just like, look, we're here for you. Like, we know this is hard. Like, they were very reassuring. Leanne was like, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to find out who wrote this. This is not over. Please know this isn't over. This, we're so sorry. And at that moment I was like, this is stupid. I want to quit. Like, I don't even want to be here anymore. Like, I'm putting in all this time. I'm going out of my way to participate. And then this happens when like, it's, just, I didn't even want this anyway. Right. So I was so upset, and they were like, look, just go home, cool down. This isn't over. We're going to talk about it tomorrow. It'll be okay. And that was kind of it. They didn't really get into anything else other than to tell me right after the meeting, like, we're just going to get to the bottom of this, but we wanted you to know what happened. So then I'm going home. On my way home, I get a phone call from a reporter from the school newspaper, who then is like, hey, we were at the Senate meeting today. We heard about the letter. We just want to ask you some questions. And, I had just gotten out of that meeting. I had just finished crying and was kind of like, all right, let me wipe my tears, put on a strong face to go home because I don't want people to know that like they got to me. I'm considering quitting. So I'm already kind of like, what am I even doing here? And then this reporter calls me to ask me what happened. And so I gave her an unfiltered account of what I thought happened. And left it at that and just said, you know what, I don't know. I think they're going to get to the bottom of it. We don't know who wrote the letter, but, I'm sure they'll figure something out. And if there's procedurally, I had no idea, but I said, if there's a way that they can, reopen an application process and I'm still the most qualified candidate, I hope they pick me, and I kind of left it at that. I show up to school the next day. And as I'm walking across campus to the Senate office to quit, my brother calls me in, and my brother works on campus in the HR department. So he's like, hey, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. What's going on? And he's like, well, there's a picture of you on the front page of the school newspaper. It's big. And it says like, scandal rocks the Senate. And there's like stuff about anonymous letters about your character. And like, I just want to check in on you and see what happened. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's just something stupid from the Senate. Like, I'm going to quit right now. It's not a big deal, whatever. Right. But like, my picture gets on the front page of the newspaper. Like, basically this entire community. I know not a lot of people read the school newspaper, but like, if you think of a campus as like a little mini universe, like everybody in that universe saw that there was an anonymous letter assaulting my character, which was already really frustrating. And so then I get to the Senate office, and I get pulled aside again by Cara and Leanne. They pull me into the room again. We sit down, and it's like the same thing again. We're sitting next to Cara, Leanne's across from me. And then they say, okay, so here's what we're going to do. Cara wants to tell you something. And so they break the news to me that because I was not voted and confirmed, that I can't be brought up again. They actually need to, by procedure, consider a different candidate because I was vetted and not approved. And so I said, okay. And Cara then says, I don't want any other candidate. Like, I only wanted you to be the vice president. You are the only person that is qualified. Nobody else is qualified or experienced enough. And so therefore, I'm not going to nominate anybody else. And then her and Leanne proceed to talk me through this. We're going to open a nominations process, and we're just going to keep saying there's no qualified candidates until the semester's over because we'd rather have no vice president if we can't have you. And at that point, I'm like, don't go through all that trouble. I've thought about it. I don't even want to be here anymore. Like, this has left a very sour taste in my mouth. I really feel respected by these folks. Like, I really think that this was like a disrespectful assault on my character. These people don't even know me, and the people that do know me should have known better. And so I started to give my I'm going to quit the Senate speech and try my hardest to leave gracefully. And Leanne stops me. And Leanne says, if you quit, that is what whoever wrote this, that is what they want. Like, they want to push you out of here. And so your answer should not be to quit. Your answer should be to stay and take up as much space as possible. Because when someone assaults your character like that, the best thing you can do is prove them wrong and show grace. And you are someone who is qualified. Everybody knows it. Everybody understands it. And like, somebody wouldn't go through these great anonymous lengths if they weren't threatened by your ability. And so why would you quit? Don't quit. Stay here. Help us figure this out. Take up space with us. And take up space while Kara sits next to an empty chair the rest of the semester, because that is what happened was wrong. And so I think about it and I'm crying, and I'm kind of like, when you're like between that rock and the hard place where one of like, the good of you is like, okay, she's right. Yeah, stay. And then the other person is like, this is bullshit. You could do so many other better things with your time. Like, all that stuff is like in the balance, and we're in the middle of the semester. And so I decide to stay. And take up space and do what Leanne advised me to do. And so during that semester, I stayed on board. I chaired committees. I got funding for organizations. After that newspaper, more people came to me to sponsor their funding proposals than other people. And so I was able to get more things passed. I was able to get resolutions passed about our health center. I was able to be on advisory committees. I took up space. I got in the way of, whatever things were not fair. I checked people on parliamentary procedure because I knew it like the back of my hand. And so everything took longer when I was in the meetings because I just knew how to take up space. And the Senate went without a vice president for the rest of the year because Kara really had my back and refused to let them tell her who to pick. Other things happened as well. So we had a conflict resolution meeting with myself and that girl Maria that was mentioned in the letter. There was a lot of suspicion that maybe she was the one who wrote the letter and was upset. She tried to play it off. It was very like, oh no, I don't know who did it, blah, blah, blah. And by the end of the year, when a new Senate cycle had started and there was new elections, we found out that her boyfriend at the time, who was a guy running for president, was the person who wrote the letter and was trying to get her into that position. And it came out during his, president election speech, and he did not win. Somebody else won. I ended up quitting the Senate that year, but I was brought on in the next year to serve as the director of personnel, which meant that I got to be the person vetting everybody that ever got appointed, every single senator's qualifications, all those things. And I learned this very big lesson about, what it means when people have your back and what happens when people are misjudge you. And, I had to learn grace. I was not a very graceful person in my, 21 years of age at that point. I was still very upset and very angry with my colleagues. But at the same time, like all that kept running in the back of my mind was Leanne saying, take up space and don't be afraid to take up space. And by the end of that year, I was the senator that got more done than any of the other senators. And they went without the VP, and it still worked out. So she was doing two people's job and I was doing multiple senators' jobs. I learned a lot about professionalism. I got a lot of apologies at the end of the year from people who misjudged me. And that guy who wrote the letter lost his bid to be the president, and never heard from him again. So that is my story, and thank you for listening to my first political scandal.
Hey, thank you so much, Diana. Look at you now, owning your own business, an author. Like, yeah, you've got it. So yeah, the audience is loving your story. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, we are going to keep moving along. Up next, we have Matt Gordon. Let's welcome Matt to the virtual stage.
Woo!
Hey, everyone. So,
Matthew Gordon is a father, filmmaker, photographer, and storytelling consultant based in Northern California. He works with change makers, mission-minded entrepreneurs, and conscious businesses to craft and share purpose-driven stories. His work has appeared in the Washington Post and has been screened at conferences, film festivals, and community gatherings. And tonight, Matt's going to share a story entitled Chip. Take it away, Matt.
Thanks, Tammy. Hey, everyone. I'll just jump right in. This is a story about two of the most important teachers in my life. And I've been thinking a lot about them because they're not going to be around much longer. The first, Julia, because she has terminal cancer. Counting the days. Another teacher, Chip, I'm going to get to that in the story. So you'll find out about why Chip won't be around. I first met Julia in a very usual way that you meet a teacher. I was getting my MFA in documentary film, and she was a visiting professor. She was like a big deal in her grandmotherly kind of way. She had been nominated for 3 Oscars and went on to win one, and she was pretty cool. And I was super nervous when I got the chance to show her one of I think it was my second student film. I had no idea what she was going to think, but she said, "Sure, yeah, show it to me. Let me see." I hit play, and I'm not looking at the screen at all. I'm just watching her face, and it's just blank. And then, stays blank. And finally at the end, I press stop, and there's just this long, uncomfortable pause. I don't really know what Julia thought of me, probably not much. Here's this feminist film icon, and I'm just a straight white dude. So she's probably not expecting much. And so she just kind of looks at me and then says, "Oh, so you're a real filmmaker." Wow. Those words, even to this day, those words mean so much to me because I didn't feel like a real filmmaker. I'm not even sure I still feel like a real filmmaker, but Julia was saying, "Sure, yeah, you can be one." And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the most important thing a teacher can do is not actually give you a lesson, but give you permission. And she had given me permission to be that thing that I so wanted to be. And so cut to 1 year later, and instead of becoming a filmmaker, I was a stay-at-home dad, full-time stay-at-home dad. And it was in this world that I met Chip. The woman who was at that time my wife had just gotten a job in Sacramento. Our first son was 3, and we were starting a new life in the city. And I can remember, I'll back up. Those people that you meet and you just wow, this is going to be a relationship. This is going to be an important, moment in my life. It was the opposite of that with Chip. The first word that kind of comes to mind when I think about that first time I encountered Chip is repulsion, disgust. And the infuriating thing about Chip is that Chip didn't care at all what I thought. And the reason for that is that Chip was an inanimate object. Chip was my kitchen sink. And before you judge me for anthropomorphizing my kitchen sink and naming him and carrying on a relationship with my sink, I need to remind you that I was a stay-at-home parent. And for any of you who have been stay-at-home parents for any length of time, you will know that the kitchen is the center of all things. Your days are spent making meals, cleaning meals, and then doing it again. In fact, my marriage therapist likened it to running a 24-hour diner, except in addition to being the owner of the diner, you're the food buyer, the short order cook, the waiter, the bus boy, and pretty often like a cop, off-duty cop at the counter who has to like break up some fights. So that was my world. Chip and I were together all the time. And even thinking about this story, I made the mistake of actually calculating how many meals I had made. And I realized in the course of being a stay-at-home dad, I had made 17,820 meals. It's probably a little more than that now, for a grand total of 360,000 dishes washed. And under normal circumstances, even with an amazing sink, that's too many dishes. But Chip wasn't just any sink. Chip is the most disgusting sink in the world. And to get a picture of this, I need to describe Chip for you. At some point, probably like in the 60s, maybe mid 60s, Chip had been beautiful. I mean, like, I'm guessing kind of a cream colored, smooth surface. And then life happened and Chip got chipped. And like the gunk and the grime of life started to seep in, and Chip began to blister and bubble. And then the blisters popped, revealing this like black and gray and yellow pockmarked, diseased looking surface that's kind of spread from the drain up around the edges of the sink to the yellowing grout, which was at this point beginning to crack and crumble. And of course, then there's the smell of Chip, kind of like a wet dog with a little whiff of sewer, which is because the faucet had not been sealed properly. So it provided the ideal sort of growing environment for mold and mildew, which would spread out from the faucet up into the knobs. And no matter how much bleach I would use, it would just grow back. It seemed like within hours. And so that was how I spent my days. I was stuck with Chip because we were a single income family. And for some insane reason, we had chosen to remodel every part of the house except for the kitchen. And we couldn't afford to fix it. And so Chip and I were stuck. And the only thing worse than looking at Chip was the fact that Chip made me look at myself. And I didn't like what I saw. I would sit there washing and imagine all the people who were in my grad program and all the films they were making and festivals they were going to and tenure track teaching positions they were getting and the beautiful sinks they had. Porcelain, stainless steel. They were so gorgeous. I was sure of it. And so it went on like this, me miserable and Chip completely indifferent until one day. It was completely normal spring day in a completely unnormal year. It was 2020, the spring of 2020, and the world had just gone into lockdown and my marriage had just broken up. And there I was at the sink, washing dishes. Everything I knew about the world, frankly, and about my place in it, my life had been completely wiped away, much like I was wiping away a big ketchup smear from this robin egg blue plate. And I remember this, that I was doing this because in my head, I was trying to imagine, like, how could I film this, like the ketchup, that red ketchup swirl and smear kind of running down the drain? It captured my attention. And I was imagining, like, could you even make a story about washing dishes? And if so, what would be the appropriate lens, like 35 millimeter, 24 millimeter? And like, would you have it to the side? So I was thinking about all of this. And then the strangest thing happened. It was like all of a sudden the focal length widened and there was like another camera person and I was watching myself washing the dishes. And I thought, oh, interesting. I'm telling a story and washing. And then all of a sudden, like the lens got wider again and I could sense out the screen door and I could smell the breeze that was blowing in and the smell of the screen and the smell very faintly of the orange blossoms, which had just opened up. And then suddenly it was like wider still. And I closed my eyes and I realized I could hear the loquat leaves like rustling in the wind, and the bees and the gardenias and the wind chimes, and my kids laughing from somewhere in the yard. And I opened my eyes and I just started to laugh and cry at the same time, because I realized that everything I needed was right there. A home, food, a family, even a chance to be creative while washing dishes. And I realized that if I could find happiness in that moment, there was no place that I couldn't find it. Somehow, through just sheer persistence, Chip had given me permission to be a dad, to be with myself, to be of use. Most importantly, to be imperfect and unfinished. Pretty soon, my wife and I will be finalizing our divorce and moving off into different houses, which will be hard and beautiful and crazy. And I know that whoever moves into this house next is not going to keep Chip around. And so Chip will go wherever old sinks go. But I will always carry a piece of Chip with me and treasure everything that is imperfect and unfinished, including myself. Thank you.
Matt, thank you so much for sharing. What beautiful imagery. So yeah, share your love in the chat. Everyone's applauding. Thank you, Matt. Okay. Just need a moment from that. Okay, our next storyteller is Jean Green. Let's welcome Jean to the virtual stage. Jean worked for the state of California for many years as a loan officer. She is now retired, enjoying life with family and friends, and stepping way outside of her comfort zone. She says that participating in this event is exciting and a very scary opportunity. Tonight, Jean will be sharing a story entitled Surprise, Surprise, Surprise. And Jean, we are so excited to have you here. Take it away.
Oh, Jean, we can't hear you. Here we go.
Back in early 1989, I was working as a loan officer, and my job was really stressful, and I was miserable. I was married, we had 2 kids, and we kept them in everything to keep them out of trouble. So I was constantly running. Well, we both were, because with 2 kids, we're constantly getting one to this activity and picking the other one up from a different activity. But because I was so miserable in the job I had, I was thinking of a career change. I wanted to go back to school to become a counselor. I'd had a passion for that for so many years. But I also had some health issues that had been going on for more than a year. I'd gone to see my doctor, and she said, well, you're probably going to have a hysterectomy. I just kind of looked at him and went, no. What's mine is mine, and I'm keeping it. So I left her office and continued on with life. But as time went on, the problem grew worse. So I had to go back and visit her again. And she said, well, Jean, I think you're going to have that hysterectomy that you don't want. But I'm sending you for a full body x-ray so I can see what's going on. She scheduled me for the x-ray, and I went. And at the end of the x-ray, the technician said, well, Mrs. G, all we see is that you have a spastic stomach, but we're sending the results to your doctor and she'll give you a call. The next day, my doctor called, And she said, Jean, I just finished going over the results of your x-ray. And I see a lump in your gut. And I'm thinking, a lump in my gut? And she said, I think you're really going to have that surgery, but I'm going to schedule you for an ultrasound so we can see what's going on. And I'm scheduling it for next week. So the following week, I went for the ultrasound. And I was laying there. And the technician was doing her thing. You know, she put the jelly on and she's rubbing it around and clicking. Slide and click, slide and click. For what seemed to have been an eternity. And I looked over at her and said, are they that big? And she said, what? I said, the tumors. And she went, oh, that's right. I was supposed to be looking for tumors. I was looking at the baby. I said, no, you're not looking at a baby. I'm not pregnant. I had my tubes cut and burned over 8 years ago. I am not pregnant. She turned that monitor around and said, do you see that line across the screen? That's a baby. And at that moment, with her attitude and my emotions, I felt myself rising up to get her in her collar and say, how dare you? But then I thought, this is not her fault. She has nothing to do with this. So I laid back and she continued clicking away. But as she was clicking, I was making plans. I was making plans to hurt my husband when I got home. I was going to really hurt him. When I got home, I was so angry. I couldn't even talk to him. So I just changed clothes and went to work. I didn't tell anyone because this was truly a surprise that I couldn't get excited about. As I was thinking about this life-changing event, the memory of a poster that I'd had on my desk for a long time came to mind. And it was a picture of a road going up the side of a mountain. Very scenic, beautiful. And at the top of the mountain, the road turned, and it appeared that it ended. And the caption said, the road only ends at the bend if you stop. I visualized around that bend was a new career. I visualized that road going up the side of that mountain with the beautiful, beautiful scenery as my life going to the next level, back to school and a new career as a counselor. But with this information, at that moment, my road ended. I stopped. There was just no way. At my age, I would never get around that bend to the new career. I was so upset, depressed. I didn't tell anyone. I wasn't able to accept the fact because it was such a surprise. I just could not. So one day my husband came in and said, how long are you going to do this? And I said, do what? He said, deny the obvious. You're pregnant. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, how long are you going to wait before you tell everyone? And I just looked at him and said, I'm not. I just could not accept that. So I didn't tell anyone. No one knew, except, of course, the neighbors that he blabbed off to. But my pregnancy wasn't difficult to conceal because instead of gaining weight, I lost weight. And my doctor was getting really concerned because I kept losing weight. And when I was about 7.5 months pregnant, my husband and our 2 kids went on vacation. And I didn't go because, first of all, I would have been just really a twit. And I didn't feel like taking that cross-country drive. Oh, did I tell you that at the time of the ultrasound, I was 4 months pregnant? So I only had 5 months to make that mental adjustment. Anyway, after they left for vacation, I was sitting on the couch, being miserable and really, really depressed. And then I felt the baby move. And I thought, this is life, an innocent baby. A baby that had nothing to do with my dreams or my goals or even my mentality at this time. So planned or not, I had to accept the fact that in less than 2 months, I would have 3 boys. I just assumed that since I was blessed with an unrequested blessing, that I would also be granted another boy. Honestly, almost instantly, at least within a week, I went from wearing my regular clothes to having to wear maternity clothes. It seems that at the moment that I acknowledged the fact, I just expanded like a balloon. I was still miserable, but I accepted. When my husband came back, when he and the kids came back and they walked in and he looked at me and he said, "What happened? You're pregnant." And again, I wanted to hurt him because this new reality was really difficult to accept. One of the reasons was because I had a 14-year-old, a 10-year-old, and now it would be a newborn baby. That meant I had to learn to take care of a baby all over again, and I'm not a patient person. That means I had to do formulas and diaper bags and doctor's appointments. How could I handle this? How am I going to deal with a teenager and a tweener and a newborn? How am I going to do this? As time went on, and I kept feeling the baby move and hiccuping and doing somersaults, it became real. And in September of that year, that little surprise that took me what seemed to be forever to acknowledge came into the world with the brightest eyes and the biggest smile that even to this day captivates the hearts of everyone who meet him. That surprise has brought so much joy to our family. And that road that went up the side of the mountain that I thought held my new career around the bend, I didn't make it there. I didn't get there. I took a different road, a detour. But the scenery around that bend was just as beautiful and probably more fulfilling than the one in the picture. Because I was blessed with this smiling, bright-eyed baby. I was blessed to be his mom, his counselor, his advisor, and his friend. This was really a surprise worth receiving.
Wow, Jean, thank you so much. What a great surprise that turned out to be. Thank you. Yeah, a beautiful journey. Amazing. Everyone's loving it. Thank you so much, Jean. So, how are our listeners feeling tonight? Go ahead and share it in the chat. Perfect. You having fun? So as you're witnessing tonight, storytelling is powerful. It connects us, it empowers us, and it transforms us as both storytellers and listeners. Yeah, inspired and feeling good. That's what the listeners are sharing tonight. Thank you so much. So if you're enjoying the event tonight and can donate, please do. These live main events cost about $1,000 to put on. And we need that money to put on the shows and continue the work of capital storytelling. If we have 100 people in the audience, we would need each person to give $10 to cover the cost of the show. And some of that money goes to paying our staff. Some of it goes to making these events more accessible through the live captioning and also through, accessing this Zoom room to incorporate all the people who are in this audience today. And if we have extra money, we put it towards a scholarship fund for our storytelling classes, which brings me to the next topic. See, Capital Storytelling just put some links in the chat about how to donate. So if you are impacted by these stories and you want to learn more about the art of oral storytelling, go ahead and sign up for one of our classes. All of tonight's storytellers have taken at least one class with us, and several people, including myself, have had simply life-changing experiences because of those classes in the Capital Storytelling family. In fact, 2 of our storytellers tonight were my classmates earlier this year. And yeah, and the timing is excellent because we have a couple of classes starting this summer. Storytelling 101 is a 4-week course that starts on Sunday, July 11th. And Storytelling 201 is a 3-week course that starts on Thursday, August 12th. And Capital Storytelling has placed some links in the chat if you want to visit those, or you can learn more about them by visiting our website, capitalstorytelling.com, and click under classes. And if you're interested, we also have an illustrated workbook that provides a step-by-step guide to finding and developing your stories and sharing them in your own voice. So Capital Storytelling will drop a link to that in the chat. Perfect. Thank you so much. So let's get back to the stories, shall we? Up next, we have John Aubert. John Aubert is a professor of geography and environmental sciences at American River College in Sacramento. After realizing that his family and friends were finally getting tired of hearing his stories, I doubt that, he was ecstatic to discover that he could tell them to strangers. In addition to storytelling, John's other interests include movies, hiking, fly fishing, and volunteering in his community. And tonight, John will share a story entitled Babies, Road Trips, Whales, and Teenagers. Welcome to the stage, John. Woo.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Lisa. Thanks to everybody who made this possible. And thanks, folks, for coming out. So the hour-long drive was silent, tense. I was sure we were going to miss the boat. I was angry. I was heartbroken. I was lost. This was definitely not the parenting experience that I had signed up for. We were once so close, and now it was all fading away. Looking back at her teenage gaze in the rearview mirror, her eyes seemed filled with disdain. Now, I'd always liked kids, but I wasn't remotely prepared for the depth of love, heartache, and emotional investment that would come with becoming a new father. To our dismay, parenting didn't start off so swimmingly for my wife Nancy and I, as our daughter Jenny landed in the newborn intensive care unit with breathing problems when she was born. And while we were incredibly thankful for the wonders of modern medicine, the whole experience was stressful and emotionally draining. The second night, sensing that my rock star wife was nearing complete exhaustion, I urged her to get some rest, and I promised that I would show up at the hospital for the scheduled 3 a.m. feeding. When I walked through those doors, the friendly nurses looked at me quizzically and asked me what I was doing there. I'm here to take care of my little girl, I said with my newfound sense of paternal pride and responsibility. Sitting there in that sterile room, holding her, giving her a bottle looking at her perfect little face. All worries melted away. We were the only two people in the universe. Thankfully, she made a full recovery, and I poured myself into fatherhood. We played, we hiked, we read, we sang. I have this image of her at 3 years old, a photograph, actually. She's playing dress up and wearing a princess dress, a feather boa, and running shoes. So stinking cute. Well, when she wasn't looking, I pulled out my camera and I snapped a photo. She's standing in the front doorway of our house with one foot out the door, paused, hesitating, looking out into a world of possibility. Just a perfect moment. When she was about 6, I began to make up these elaborate serialized bedtime stories about this adventurous little chihuahua named Minty. Just when I thought I couldn't come up with another installment, she'd plead, "Daddy, please, just one more." I adored that little girl, and she adored me. But little girls grow up, and at some point, they're no longer interested in stories about comical little chihuahuas. They're no longer interested in going out to lunch with dad. Even frozen yogurt can't lure them in. And eventually, dads completely lose their luster, and a teenager just needs to find herself on her own terms. No dads needed. I get it, but it was still heartbreaking for me. Death by 1,000 cuts. I missed my little girl, and it was pretty clear that she didn't miss me. So that was the fragile emotional landscape of our relationship that morning as I looked back at my 13-year-old in the rearview mirror, racing to catch that boat. We'd flown from California back to Ohio to join some of my wife's family for this grand summer road trip to Canada. And eventually we made our way to a little village about an hour east of Quebec City on the northern banks of the St. Lawrence River. And for a geography teacher and nature lover, I was beside myself with excitement and anticipation. We rented a house overlooking the massive river. We ate poutine, a Canadian delicacy if you're not familiar with it. We climbed to the top of this massive waterfall. We explored the northern hemisphere's most southerly fjord. We stepped into a 500 million year old meteorite impact crater, and on and on. It was glorious. And at one point I was commiserating with my brother-in-law about teenager woes, and he said that his daughter, just a few years older than mine, hadn't spoken with him in 2 months. That scared the crap out of me. So the day comes that we're all going to pile into cars and head out whale watching, and Jenny refuses to go. We've come 3,000 miles and all you want to do is sit inside and stare at a screen? Are you kidding me? I said angrily. Are you trying to ruin everyone's vacation? And I threw in, just for good measure. Fortunately, before I could make things even worse, my wife stepped in, spoke with her, and convinced her to come. But my heart was heavy. So racing to catch that boat, her angry face filled my rearview mirror. Finally, we arrived just in time at this little village situated right about where the St. Lawrence River begins to open up into the Atlantic Ocean. And we opted to go out in a Zodiac, which puts you right down next to the water and where you have to suit up in foul weather gear just to stay warm and dry. So 7 of us, kids and adults, suited up, stepped aboard, and headed out into the world aquatic. And it was awesome, magical. We'd see whales in the distance through the mist. Then this large pod of belugas just 100 yards away. Then, not 10 feet off the port side of the Zodiac, I noticed this large ring of bubbles begin to emerge from the depths. And I can barely breathe, and I can barely speak. My heart's racing. And finally I say, look, look, look. And just then a massive humpback whale with her gaping maw open wide rises from the sea, scooping up thousands of krill before slowly rolling onto her side and disappearing into the blue-black. It was unbelievable, an intense, emotional, deeply affecting experience. I looked back to see everyone's reaction, and my eyes paused on Jenny, her face peering out of the tightly drawn hood of her parka. And I'd don't know how and I don't know why, but in that moment, I was instantly catapulted a decade into the past. Against all logic and reason, I was looking at the face of my precious little 3-year-old, beaming with wonder and pure delight. As I gazed at her face, I was completely overcome with emotion, a paralyzing mix of fear, joy, bewilderment, and love. I was having an utterly terrifying and exquisitely beautiful break from reality. There she was, my little girl. I turned away and wept into the sea, realizing that she had been with me all along. So that was 4 years ago. When I asked Jenny for permission to share this story that features her so intimately, she agreed, albeit begrudgingly. Surprise, surprise. When I later shared with her that I'd told the story to a few folks and that it had been well received, she said, "You're welcome." Now, I will always mourn the loss of that little girl. I think that's a fairly common parental emotion. But the world evolves, relationships evolve. We're both growing and we're both different. I'm a wear my heart on my sleeve kind of guy, and she's not. She's headed off to her freshman year of college, and I'm not. I'm a fairly flexible person, and she's not. She knows everything, and I don't. But one thing's for sure, we're definitely both smart asses. Now, just a couple of years ago, she had to have 50 hours of behind the wheel driver's training with a licensed driver. And my wife did me a solid and claimed that she felt it was too stressful to jump into the car with a teenage student driver and that it was up to me. I'm pretty sure she lied. Thanks, honey. I appreciate it. It was glorious. We were trapped in the car for hours, and I shared podcasts with her, mostly storytelling. She shared playlists with me. We reminisced about little Minty the Chihuahua and laughed and laughed. At one point, I don't know how it came up, but she had this startling realization that we were pretty alike in a number of ways, mostly owing to our type A personalities. And I looked at her and I said, "It's kind of horrifying and pretty cool at the same time, huh?" She looked at me with a smirk and said, "Yep." Thanks for listening.
Yay. Thank you so much, John. That was such a beautiful story. Yep. Jan says, "Death by 1,000 cuts is a rite of passage for parents, along with the joys." Yeah. Thank you, John. So we are lucky to have John as a regular storyteller at our open mics. The open mic is this kind and compassionate space for people to practice sharing their stories with a live audience. There's no theme, and the stories are not curated. We typically have 5 or 6 storytellers during a session, and then we open it up to feedback from the listeners, which is often the best part. It is just so wonderful to see storytellers and listeners connecting in real time through this art form. And everyone usually always has a blast. It's such a fun time. And I guarantee you that the stories you hear in those sessions will stay with you for quite some time. The open mics are hosted on a monthly basis, typically the first Saturday of the month. And due to the July 4th holiday, our next open mic will be Saturday, August 7th. And Capital Storytelling has dropped a link to the next open mic in the chat, or you can check it out on the webpage under events. We look forward to seeing you at an open mic in the near future, right? Our next main event is going to be in October. We're still deciding how to do that. Maybe it's going to be in person, virtual, or some sort of hybrid of the two. And we'll post the information on our website and update you all through our mailing list. Now let's bring our 5th and final storyteller for the evening on stage. Let's welcome Layla Barakat. Layla is a creative writer with the love of poetry and the outdoors. A sampling of her many interests include hiking with her family, herbalism, and connecting with others through storytelling. She lives in Northern California with her family, 3 cats, and 16 plant babies. Quite impressive, Layla. Tonight, Layla will be sharing a story entitled Other. Layla, welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I often get stopped on the street by curious passerbys and bombarded with questions and comments like, "What are you? Where are you from? You look so exotic. You must be mixed. What are you mixed with?" Who am I? I am the only child born to an Arabic-speaking Egyptian father, born in Egypt, and a French-speaking African-American and Puerto Rican mother, born in Louisiana. I'm told my first word was in French, and my second, Arabic. For some reason or another, I favored speaking Arabic, and my parents, who had really high hopes of me working for the United Nations one day, wanted me to become fluent in the language and seized every opportunity to send me to Egypt each summer to mingle with cousins who were my age. I had such an emptiness and longing for siblings growing up. In the States, I only had older cousins on my mom's side of the family, and by the time I was school-aged, they were in their late teens and early 20s, and neither of us had anything in common except family, love of gumbo, and maybe fried chicken. I love traveling to Egypt in the summer. My parents were pretty big on giving me experiences and fostering that independence. And so they sent me to Egypt on my own for a total of 20 hours of traveling. So that's 2 planes, one from here to Frankfurt, Germany, and then from Frankfurt to Cairo. As the pilot announced we were getting ready for landing, I could barely contain my excitement. I anticipated these week-long sleepovers with my cousins and warm cuddles with my aunts and uncles. And I fondly remember stepping off the airplane and being greeted by this thick, humid breeze that filled my nostrils and lungs. It was quite suffocating, really, and instantly curled my freshly pressed hair. My cousins and I spent our days cooling off from the sweltering heat in the depths of the blue-green Mediterranean Sea. In Egypt, it's customary for the visiting family member to bring gifts, especially when traveling from abroad. It's funny, actually, because their most requested item from America was sunscreen. Sunscreen to protect their skin from harmful UV rays that beam down on long summer days at the beach. I, on the other hand, wanted nothing to do with sunscreen. I mean, if an elder relative insisted that I put some on, I would do so out of respect and then later find a way to wipe it off. I had zero desire to protect my skin from getting burnt to a crisp. I mean, like every year I would come back just burnt so bad. I'm like surprised I don't have skin cancer, really, because it was that bad. But in fact, I actually considered myself lucky and blessed to be one of the light-skinned people who didn't turn red when sunburnt. I love the way my skin looked when tanned, and I tried to expose every single body part I could to the sun, even my butt cheeks. I'd look into the mirror and I'd flash a smile at my reflection. I felt beautiful. The contrast of my dark skin and white teeth just filled my heart with so much joy, and I just couldn't stop looking at myself. My skin color was finally the color that I longed it to be when I would stick out like a sore thumb, at family gatherings, or when people would ask me what I'm mixed with. I was that smooth caramel colored flesh that I did not inherit from the beautiful, strong, resilient African American women in my family. I couldn't stop looking at myself. In that moment, I felt like I belonged, like I had an identity, like I could finally be legitimately considered Black or even Puerto Rican. Except that I wasn't, at least not by society standards, not even by some of my own extended family members' standards. And who the heck is creating these standards anyway? Growing up, I had what I like to call paperwork anxiety. I absolutely loved being mixed race, but those dichotomized questions about race or ethnicity on those forms paralyzed me to no end. I never knew how to answer. What was I? I mean, I didn't want to deny any part of me, you know? Like I felt like I identified as Black, but then I'd always been told I wasn't Black enough to be considered fully African American. And then there were people who told me I didn't count as Puerto Rican because I didn't speak Spanish and knew very little about the culture. And even though I also identified as Egyptian, my Arabic wasn't that great. And outside of my immediate family, I was labeled a khawega, which means foreigner, due to my American ways. So back then there was no option to like check off 2 or more races. That's like recent, but so I would just choose other, and if it were an option, I would leave it blank because I definitely felt like another. So just as tans start to fade, so did my confidence in identifying as Black, Puerto Rican, or Egyptian. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And the feelings of emptiness and longing grew and grew, and I longed for acceptance, for comfort, for an identity. Who was I? I took a gap year after high school to try to figure it out. And just like previous summers, I boarded the plane to Egypt, except this time it was a one-way ticket and a mission to immerse myself in the culture and better learn the language so I wouldn't be considered a khawega anymore. I was also seeking a sort of spiritual revival, and being Muslim, I figured Egypt would be the best place to deepen my understanding and the practice of my religion. At that time, Ramadan, which is the Muslim holy month, was in October. And I decided that I would fast the entire 30 days in solidarity with my cousins, aunts, and uncles. Ramadan is such a festive occasion with special treats that typically come out once a year, kind of like pumpkin spice lattes. The typically boisterous streets are pin drop quiet when families get together and break their fasts. And usually they break their fasts over homemade, over a homemade feast, featuring lots of popular Egyptian dishes. One of my favorites is actually something called macarona bechamel. And it's basically like, it's just pasta with like ground beef and lots of bechamel sauce. It's delicious. It sounds simple, but it's so good. So good. Okay. So it's a month of just generosity, a month of forgiveness, a month of reflection. I just so happened to try on the headscarf known as hijab one afternoon after seeing one of my cousins wearing it in a stylish way. Honestly, I didn't even know it was possible to style it. And as I looked in the mirror, I felt this familiar feeling of self-love dispersing throughout my entire body and filling my heart. The soft cotton fabric framed my face and I felt beautiful. An overwhelming sense of clarity washed over me that day. I have a vivid memory of the sensation, and the best way to describe it is to imagine someone with a key ring filled with a bunch of keys, trying to find the keyhole's perfect match. And then that relief they feel when it glides through and turns unhindered. In that moment, it didn't matter that I wasn't considered Black or Puerto Rican or Egyptian. There would be no mistaking my identity with this thing on. So, who am I? I am Muslim. I am Black. I am Puerto Rican. I am Egyptian. And I am not someone you can define with a check mark. Thank you.
Wow, Layla, thank you. I still have goosebumps from your story. Yeah. Crowd is loving it. So thank you again, Layla. Well, that is our lineup for today. That is our show. So let's go ahead and bring the storytellers back on stage. Thank you, storytellers. Thank you so much for being here tonight and for sharing your journeys with us. And thank you to the listeners for showing up tonight. You have made tonight so, so special. And now you're part of the Capital Storytelling family, and we hope to see you again at a live main event, open mic, or class in the near future. We want to thank Cap Radio again for sponsoring tonight's event. And a huge thanks go to Lisa Cantrell, the Executive Director of Capital Storytelling, who has been behind the scenes running the tech and posting in the chat as Capital Storytelling. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. We hope you have a lovely evening and a fantastic weekend.